And I thought, what a shame to die, making money. And actually making money was a tremendous strain, because most of the poverty and misery in the world today is due to bad government. The principle of sovereignty is the prevailing principle. If the most powerful nation on earth is guided by that principle, that's the principle that's going to prevail. And
you've been extremely accomplished in giving it away. And you, in one book that I read that you wrote, I think your last one, you noted that Henry Kissinger said that nations have no principles, only interest, and you are sometimes said to have principles and no interest. But indeed, there is quite a contradiction between making money and philanthropy and political involvement such as you engage in. How do you see these two things as reconciling in your mind?
Well, first of all, in order to give money away, you've got to make it first, unless you inherit it. So I don't see any contradiction. But let's say I was concerned about the world and before I became a billionaire. So when I became rich, and I actually set up my foundation long before I became a billionaire, that goes back to 1979, when my investment fund reached $100 million, and my wealth was about $20 million. And actually making money was a tremendous strain. Very risky, very strenuous. And I wondered, why do I do it? And that's when I set up a foundation. So I think that, the two things, making money and giving money away, are all inspired by the same sort of set of ideas.
Well, let me ask you, do you enjoy the making of the money as much as you do the activities that it enables you to engage in once it's there?
Well, I used to enjoy making money a lot. And it's a very exciting activity, it's very challenging. But it didn't give me the kind of satisfaction that I have in giving it away. I mean, I had one particular experience that I sort of referred to when I was under tremendous strain, and I thought that I was going to have a heart attack. And I thought, what a shame to die, making money. And
well, we're glad you did make it.
Now, in the things that I am engaged in, I'm actually willing to put my life at risk, and I think it makes me feel much more complete. My activities are fully in compliance, not only with the letter of the law, but also with the spirit, because the campaign finance was basically designed to deny access to special interests. And these organizations that I support, they were there before I started supporting them. They were deliberately not regulated by the campaign finance. And the Federal Election Commission reaffirmed this just recently. So that is, in other words, I'm complying with the letter. But I think that the purpose was not to take money out of politics, because that's an impossibility, but to deny special interests access. And if you support these organizations, you get no access. It doesn't get you anything. And because of that, it's very difficult to get support for it. I'm trying to get other people to contribute, and it isn't easy. No, you have currently some kind of a distortion in globalization, because you've got global markets, but political arrangements remain firmly based on the principle of sovereignty. And because of the greatly increased interdependence, what goes on inside other countries is of vital interest to us and to everybody in the world. So what kind of regime you have in Afghanistan, let's say, has a bearing on our security. And that poses an unsolved problem. What do you do about internal political developments in countries? Because most of the poverty and misery in the world today is due to bad government of one sort or another. Repressive regimes, corrupt regimes, failed states, and so on. What do you do about that? And that is the great unsolved problem that we need to address. Well, I think the principle of sovereignty is the prevailing principle, but it is becoming modified because there are some universal principles that begin to limit the concept of absolute sovereignty. So I think if you look at the sovereignty is sort of an anachronistic or a slightly atavistic idea goes back to where you had kings and subjects, and the kings ruled over their subjects. And then in the French Revolution, the king was killed and the people took possession of sovereignty. And that's modernity. That gave rise to the nation state. But the elected or non-elected governments very often abuse the sovereignty that belong to the people. And in that case, there is a need for the international community to intervene. And that concept needs to be elaborated. It is slowly being developed. There was a report which argued that there is a responsibility to protect, that when the people are abused by their own rulers and human rights are abused, that there is an international responsibility to intervene. That there was a declaration in Warsaw in the year 2000, which established the principle that it is in the interest of all democracies to help the development of democracy in other countries. But this is a principle that is an empty statement, like so many principles. But to breathe life into it, I think, is what is now needed. So I think this is the direction that we ought to move, and I think the United States ought to lead that movement. However, this administration has led us in a very different direction, because they act on the belief that international relations are relations of power and not law, that international law merely serves to legitimize whatever power has accomplished. And since we are so powerful, we have a right to impose our will on the world. And that, I think, is tremendously dangerous, because in fact we are very powerful. And this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If the most powerful nation on earth is guided by that principle, that's the principle that's going to prevail. And then we are really going back towards a less civilized world. We can judge our leadership in the elections. And that's why I'm arguing that we have to reject what this administration has done, particularly after September 11. So this Bush doctrine which basically is built on two pillars. One, that we must have maintain absolute military superiority globally and in every region of the world. And second, that we have the right for preemptive military action. If you combine these two, you see, you really have a world of two levels of sovereignty. The United States whose sovereignty is sacrosanct, and the sovereignty of the rest of the world, which is subject to the Bush doctrine of preemptive action. It's like Orwell's Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Mm-hmm. That is, I think, where we have gone wrong. And if we now reject that, then I think we can undo, we can treat the events of the last few years as an aberration, and we can resume our place in the world. Now, you have various kinds of fundamentalism, sort of allied in the present government. You've got what I called market fundamentalism. In other words, a belief in free enterprise without constraint, because you can rely on the invisible hand of the market to bring about equilibrium. So that was market fundamentalism, and I was a critic of that. But then you have got religious fundamentalism, and now you have this belief in American supremacy, and that, I think, this is sort of the neoconservative, the project for a new American century that was formed in 1997, and then advocated invading Iraq in 1998. That, I think, is a dangerous new addition, because as long as you advocate competition, unrestrained competition in the commercial field, that's one thing. But if you advocate competition in the military field, that, I think, is very dangerous for world peace.
Mm-hmm. So in a sense, we end up with fundamentalism counterposed to fundamentalism.
Well, you have a sort of an unholy alliance between these various fundamentalist forces. You also, of course, have a degree of continuity in the government, because not everybody in the government is of this ilk. And you certainly, in the State Department, you basically have continuity and a much less ideological view of the world. It's around the Defense Department that this particular school of thought is concentrated, and that's where I think the real danger comes from. In the end, an open society depends on a well-informed electorate that is, let's say, exercises reasonable judgment. And in that respect, our open society is now endangered in ways that it wasn't before. Because there is, and this is appropriate to a school of journalism, that there is a kind of an Orwellian truth machine operating in this country. And it's a very strange phenomenon, because, of course, it's not new that information and facts should be twisted. They always are in the political process. And Orwell saw the danger of propaganda 50 years ago, But when he was talking, when he wrote 1984, he was referring to a ministry of truth in a country, or in an imaginary country, where the ministry controlled all the media. Here we do have free media, and nevertheless there is a way to twist facts and move opinion.